Okay.
We're recording with this.
Yes. All right. So it's today is what's today's date? Today is
6th of June.
6th of June,
2014.
2014.
How time flies.
2014. So now I just see here with the Honorable Dr. Spio Garbrah, and I'll let him introduce himself in a second. And nephew, right?
Yes, Benjamin.
Nephew Benjamin Spio Garbrah. My son's actually called Benjamin, so Gyepi-Garbrah. There we go. So, Doctor, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you because you've met some of the greatest men on earth. So me sitting here, I feel like I'm Bill Clinton shaking your hand because I've seen that picture of you and Bill Clinton. For those, I'm actually going to be posting this on my YouTube and Facebook, so it'll be Ghanaians, non-Ghanaians, and everywhere. Exactly. So for those who don't know you, why don't you just give us sort of a 30-second introduction of who you are?
That's always a big challenge, but I like to see myself as an African. Sometimes I'm asked, am I Nigerian? Or am I Kenyan? I say, yeah, I am sometimes. Only because the nationality doesn't matter. We happen to have been divided by colonialists a couple of centuries ago into the different countries that we have in Africa today. So yes, we may carry a passport of one country or the other. But I have spent a lot of my time in institutions that aim to promote Africa's integration and Africa's economic development. Currently, I'm still associated with the African Development Bank, where I used to work some 20 years ago. But I guess some people know me as someone who has been a farmer, a teacher, a banker, a salesman, an advertising executive, a PR man.
A cabinet
minister, ambassador, a politician, etc. So I think that I've tried in my 60 years on earth to live life as fully as I can.
Right.
And I hope I have a few decades still ahead to
Absolutely.
make a contribution, focusing a lot on the youth. I'm very passionate about youth development, about skills development for young people. And in some countries in Africa, including my own Ghana, there's always the concern about unemployed graduates to the point where people actually form an association. What we can do for such people who are, very talented, very educated, at least cool, that haven't found the opportunities of their lives. Then, of course, there are the Ghanaians and Africans in the diaspora. Whether you call them diasporitans or afropolitans or any of them.
And I think you would be an Afropolitan, Ben.
I would be
an Afropolitan, right?
The fantastic news for them is that for the first time in the history of our continent, Africa, the continent of Africa is growing faster than any region of the world. And everyone appreciates that the 6 or 7 out of the 10 fastest growing countries in the world are in Africa. All these statistics that we all read about. Some countries are growing at 10%, 11%, 12%. Ghana has had its own 12, 13% growth. Sierra Leone is having its 12% growth. Ethiopia and others have all done 9, 10% in the past. And if that trajectory continues, which I hope it will, partly because we've now moved into democratic transitions and therefore there's competition for best practice. If you don't practice well as a government, your people vote you out. And that is putting most of our governments on their toes, even though there's still a lot of misbehavior in many parts of the continent. But by and large, the populations are putting the governments on their toes, and governments therefore are compelled to come up with initiatives or with programs that attempt to seek the welfare of the ordinary citizen. But Africans outside of the African continent have the unique experience and advantage of, generally speaking, being reasonably better paid than those back home, working in environments that give them cutting-edge knowledge and cutting-edge access to technologies, access to capital and potential for investable funds in the African market. So they should take advantage of these opportunities, whether they're in Sweden or in Japan or in Australia or in Denmark, how to connect with European, American, Asian companies that could benefit from business and commercial relationship in Africa and bringing these companies to Africa for us to establish proper, mutually beneficial arrangements that are not the colonialist type of relationships that we had in the past, but which actually lead to Africa's development. And Africa's development is also not just growth for the sake of growth, but both sustainable growth and shared and equitable growth, where the benefits of the growth can be shared by the vast majority of the population. So it's not enough to go to an African country and see skyscrapers and fancy apartment buildings that are selling for $500,000 or $1 million for an apartment. Some of them more expensive than European cities.
Exactly.
But then next to these are a lot of shacks and slums where people are really struggling to get even $1 or $2 a day.
That's true.
So there are challenges for us, for those of us who are maturer and for those of you who are also much younger.
Yes, sir.
And I think the wisdom of the age and the dynamism of
That's
the youth
right.
should also be brought together and fused.
Yes.
So that we can move together in unison towards a better and more prosperous African continent. That's what I stand for.
That's
And
right.
as part of the many hats that I wear, I've created the African Business Center for Developing Education, which we hope will be a very fundamental and important mechanism
That's
for
right.
bringing knowledge from
That's
those
right.
who have acquired the knowledge and the skill sets
Right.
to the youth who are yet to acquire all the experiences but have a lot of talent and brilliance.
That's right.
So that we can prepare them to be more productive right from the first day at work. Because if the youth are not productive enough, then Africa's economic growth will be slowed down.
That's right.
The 8, 9, 10% growth we want to see per annum cannot be sustained.
That's sustained.
Because economic growth is really about speed of economic production and
That's
activity.
right. That's right.
And diasporan youth have a fantastic role to play. The first time in human history that any 16-year-old boy can know as much as a
That's true.
60-year-old father or grandfather
Very
because
true.
of ICT.
That's right.
And you can do your Facebooks and your social media and your Instagrams and your LinkedIn's.
You're really up to the times, right?
200,000, applications
That's
on
right.
your various tablets.
Exactly.
How do we network that knowledge?
Exactly.
How do we network that experience? How do we network these aspirations?
Exactly.
So that we can mobilize ourselves, not just financially, but
Exactly.
mentally, emotionally,
Yes.
spiritually, to go back to the motherland,
Exactly.
the continent,
Exactly.
and make things happen.
That brings me to a very important point, and I almost want to get not too personal, but a little personal here, because number one, you've lived overseas for many years. You were with the World Bank as I was, but beyond that, you've been with the African Development Bank. You've been a number of cabinet roles. You've been a presidential candidate, actually close to becoming president a few times, and you're now with the African Development Bank. You've hobnobbed with the power brokers around the world. For those who understand these big concepts, the question would be, how can I do it? Because now you're back on the continent, you're doing farming and many different things. How did you do it? How did you get here? What are some of the things, the traits that have made it possible for you to be a success? Because after I met you last week, your bio mentioned that when you were with the bank, IFC, you're certainly very known for your convening power and very dynamic. So that was interesting for me to hear. But beyond that, for people who don't get a glimpse into who Dr. Spio Garbrah is, how did you get to this point to become the kind of man you've been all these years?
We have to give credit to a lot of people. Those of us who are Christians obviously would always begin with God-given talents. We have all been blessed with talents, and the Bible tells us, at least about the parable of the talents. Some get 5, some get 2, some double it, some bury it. But we pray that by God's grace, those who have talents will multiply their talents and not bury their talents and use their talents for the benefit of other people. But more equally importantly is what one's goals in life are. If one's goal in life is just to become very rich and famous for one's own benefit, then of course there's a certain path that you take. But if you realize that your purpose on earth is to be of a blessing to other people, and that whatever God blesses you with, you must also share that blessing, then your mindset and your attitude and your motivation also begins to change. And so certainly for me, most of the things that I've done, I've always looked at what can I do to make other people's lives better.
Wow, service.
So if you go to Ghana and you hear that, well, Spio Garbrah has something to do with bringing the value-added tax system into the country.
Wow.
Because I felt this is something that will make other people's lives better.
Right.
If I had something to do with establishing a Ghana Education Trust Fund,
Yep.
because this is something that is a mechanism that today is providing $200 million or more of scholarships and financial assistance to educational institutions, to academics to go for further studies, and to students to get scholarships.
Right.
So if you ask me what has been my motivation, it is that how to make society better and how to make our continent of Africa in particular, and of course my own country Ghana, better than I found it.
That's right.
I think if
That's
everybody tries to approach life with that
That's right.
mindset,
That's right.
not to say you can't be wealthy,
Exactly.
not to say you can't be rich, not to say
Exactly.
you cannot be an inventor,
Exactly.
a painter, or an engineer, but try to use those skill sets and those talents
Exactly.
to make humanity a little better than you found
Absolutely.
it.
And Dr.
that additionality is collectively a powerful force.
Powerful
for
force.
change.
That's right. Now, I want to make good use of your time, and I don't want to take more time than I need to. But I want Ben to get in some final words about what you're doing and what that means as an Afropolitan. Maybe tell people a bit about how to get in touch with you and sort of.
There are a couple of things that I think worth focusing on. I mean, obviously there's a great opportunity in Africa for a really significant resurgence of skills transfers from developed economies, or I don't even want to use those terms. From places where there's there an application of best practices to Africa. That coupled with, so basically a combination of intellectual as well as monetary capital. I mean, right now the U.S.'s competitive advantage is cheap money.
Exactly.
Finding a way to transfer some of that to Africa, merging that with Africa's intellectual talent and also significant labor force, which is in a position to be well trained. Creating that enabling environment and developing a model which is sustainable for everyone.
Absolutely.
Number one. Another piece which I think is fairly significant is this emphasis which needs to be placed on, health, wellness, fitness. I mean, it's painful to, find out that your friends you're aware of, your friends who are in their prime, are dropping dead of heart disease, mainly because of a lack of access to healthy eating choices, which doesn't make any sense. We've got the most arable terrain on the planet. We can feed ourselves. One shouldn't have to be in a country and have to struggle to find fruits and vegetables.
Exactly.
And also choices in terms of programs which also contribute to really strengthen not only the mind but the body.
So you believe in the mind and body being a flow of entrepreneurship and going after what?
Exactly. Sound mind, sound body.
Sound mind, sound body.
Sana incorporea.
Exactly.
That's right. So final words, Doctor. What would you say to encourage Afropolitans, non-Africans, Africans on the continent, grown-ups, young people, children, final words of wisdom?
That's a large group of people with each having their own unique and separate areas of interest. But I think what links us together is the fact that our continent has potential. It has a history of greatness. It has undergone some centuries of deprivation and colonialism and imperialism. It's coming out of that. It hasn't come out of that yet. It needs all its sons and daughters, wherever they are, to join hands together and take advantage of each other's strengths, so that out of our weaknesses we can benefit from other person's strengths in order to move our continent forward. For those who are outside the continent, we encourage them to visit their motherland at least once every year, and by virtue of those visits, to see what the potentials are and to take advantage of them. Governments have to provide an open environment that encourages and nurtures talent, and not have divisive programs and policies that use only a partial quantum of the talent available in any country.
That's right.
We have misused and misapplied the competitive multi-party system that has been adopted in most parts of Africa.
That's right.
And our interpretation of that is that only a particular group of people at any particular time should be benefiting from the system. So if we can modify those misuses of the structures, be more willing to use everybody's potential, talent, knowledge, skills, expertise. Our continent will be the place where everybody will be going to. Europe is in decline. The United States is in decline. Africa is on the way up. And so if you've been in Sweden for too long, looking for too long, this is the time to go back.
Time to go back.
We are waiting for you there.
I'm going back next week, so I can't wait. But Doctor, thank you so much for the time. Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much. Okay, now I just see signing off. Keep on pushing. Peace. All right.